All right. All right. We are recording. Vernon, did you hear it click or anything?
I heard you recording.
Okay, great. All right. This is Bruce Gillum, Vernon Beaver, Jamal Boone, and Whitney Sluter. And this is our case study for case study 1, letter to the community about school-based budgeting. And we will get started as we speak. Anyone want to go first and talk about what was in the book? Anybody want to go first?
I have a quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
How do you measure equity and equality?
I had that same question.
Well, that was my first thing that I wrote down. When it says, what are the problems? I don't think there's any budget, that's ever been created that is going to take care of all problems. And I made a list of these problems, and I'm like, the list has kept getting longer and longer and longer. But I see what they're trying to do, and I understand, but I feel like a lot of schools and a lot of programs are getting left out, and exactly what you guys are just saying. And I know it's different in every state as far as local and state funding. Here in North Carolina, we don't even get any money from the lottery to help out anything as well. So I think it's something that we could talk a little bit about, and if anybody else wants to add a few things, they let them go.
Well, the case study says that there is a predetermined weight that translates to real dollars, and you guys are going to have to hold your laughter when I say this. I think it reminds me of the EBOS formula that we don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Part of this is a kind of a sense of transparency. I don't know what that formula would be, and if it's anything similar to what the EBOS formula has been, we'll never know.
And then it's kind of targeting or gives schools, independent, or the administrators can decide on what the funds are going to be allocated for or something, because you have grade levels or at-risk learners. So which group of students or which particular program would you be funding with these particular funds?
Mm-hmm. And with your school improvement team and with teachers, and like what Vernon was saying last week, how many teachers are on board with helping the whole school versus helping out themselves a little bit, being selfish and trying to help out different programs. So you definitely got to have leaders of the school who are in it for the whole school and all stakeholders.
Oh, for sure.
In your schools, do y'all see your budget, or does your administration kind of have that locked down and just they look at it?
I think you might know the answer to that.
Well, our principal does, he does meet with SIT at the beginning, but I really think at the end, I kind of think he does it on his own. I really do, as far as the needs for our school.
And actually, earlier this school year, and I think I wrote this down in my notes, it seems as if when our administrator, when they met with the district leaders to discuss the budget or come up with the budget, he emailed me the itemized items, or things where the budget would be spent on, money would be spent on. It seemed like it was all decided upon. But then the email is more like, okay, what do you guys think about this? But this is after the meeting and after it's already been submitted.
Yeah. The reason I was asking is because when I talked to my principal about needing to look at the budget for this class and and I was just curious, I had to really beg him to let me see it, which at first I was like, what is the big deal? And then when I started looking at it, some of the line items on there some of them had way more money than I thought they should. And then some of them had like hardly any money when maybe some of that extra frivolous money should have been spent down there. And I'm like you, Jamal, like it was all already decided for. And he did not talk to the leadership team this year at all or the school improvement team at all about the budget for next year. He just said, this is the amount of money we're going to have for next year. We're going to have to make it work. The end. There was no discussion had. There was no room for input. And after reading this case study and reading some of the stuff before it about having your stakeholders look at your budget and having it be available, like we do not do that at our school.
It seems like it should be public information.
Yeah.
To some extent.
It almost makes me wonder, like, are they trying to hide something? Is there something in there that they don't want the public to see? So that's why I was just curious about how.
And going back to this schools-based budget, when I think about public schools, we think about things that are free, but we're charging our kids at our schools. In middle school, it's $25 to play a sport, pays for activity bus and gas. High schools are up to, I think it's now $50. We're making them pay for their lockers, textbooks, PE clothes, a lot of different things. And I'm like, does that school-based budget, does it cover those things? I mean, would a principal be able to use that budget to help offset some of that, or is that, added on? Because all of our sports teams, all of our clubs, everyone at our school and high school and even elementary school, we are fundraising like crazy. I mean, we are to get extra money for these programs. So I guess that's one question that I have. Does a school-based budget, does it help with those needs, or are those still there? Because that's, at the end, high school basketball team, I paid for a lot of kids' shoes. I paid for their participation fees just because they couldn't afford it. And I was just like, this was just something that was easy, and people in the community would help me do that. They would write a check and take care of that if I needed some help.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if your county's the same way or not, or if you've ever dealt with. Does anybody deal with school-based budget in their schools right now? No.
No.
And in the text, in the textbook, it was talking about some states who are doing this, and I'd like to really look at them to see, like, is it working? Does it work? And what about all the other programs? Does it cover those? So I don't know.
But it seems like, according to the case study, the school-based budget allows allocates dollars directly to schools based on the number of students enrolled and the specific need of those students. So if you have students who need, sports equipment, musical instruments, anything like that, those funds should be there to provide those students that access to those needs. That's what I'm seeing. I don't know.
And I was just like, and it talked a little bit about this in the text, and I was like, I was like, does it really pay for all of that stuff, or is that something that's separate? Because it talked about, a lot of different budgets and developing a budget. I have the budget from our school, and it's around $50,000, and we can't get little things. Middle school does not raise enough money on athletic events. I mean, we're already dipping into funds. Candy sales are huge at our school. I mean, so I think that has a negative impact on, we're selling candy, we're selling cards, restaurants. I mean, talk about obesity. I mean, we're really helping with obesity. I mean, trying to raise money through all these fundraisers to help kids, in our school programs.
I think that we all kind of have a little bit of, I don't know, pessimistic view of how potentially this could be manipulated. And I think that what we're saying is that it could be being manipulated now, that we're doing sort of a standard type philosophy to budgeting, and that if we move to a system like the case study refers to, how could that also be manipulated in ways
Right.
that could benefit, some and not others?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And I think we're justified to feel that way, because I think we've all been in education long enough to kind of know that it's not always on the up and up and when it comes to money.
Yeah, I think you're right, Vernon, because, even the first thing that I said was about, does any budget really cover all the needs of all kids and stakeholders? It's like, is there equity and are we going to treat all kids fair? I've just seen a lot of things at our school and in our county, things we've left off. I mean, we're losing another teaching position this year. I mean, another teacher is going to be forced out. I mean, she's got 3 years and she's
Right.
forced out. So it's like, so that makes my job
And
a lot harder for next year.
right, and ultimately, I think what I looked at the central issue here was, and how this could potentially go. What we're really talking about here under this case study is taking money. It's not really in increasing money. What we're talking about doing is looking at the amount of money that is available for the school system. And what we're talking about doing here is taking money away from affluent schools,
Right.
and putting it in lower income, special needs, at risk. And, as an equality guy, I think that that's great. But I think that if you've been in education long enough, you probably know the loudest parents and community members are the people that we would be taking money away from.
You're
The
exactly
most active people would be the people that we're taking money away from. I can't see this ever being a thing that, when you're talking about elected officials and school board members, I can't see this ever being a thing. I don't know about your systems. I can't see this ever being a thing that would fly in my current school system.
You're exactly right, Vernon. We actually talked about that a little bit last night. I was talking to my wife about this case study and just trying to get her feedback as well. And we talked about the little bit higher level kid and the affluent kids. And, these people make big time decisions on boards and get elected. So what do we do for them? That's why the equality is just not there. That's what I put down as the first one on, what is the central problem? The second one, what is the central problem?
Right.
And then does it have secondary problems? I think when you make a decision, and you're trying to get a budget and you think you got it covered, and then you start thinking about, well, what are the repercussions? What are the secondary things that happen? And there's a lot of them. And I think we just hit on one. It's very, very important.
So shouldn't the budget?
Yeah. How do you convince those? How do you convince those members, those stakeholders, to take one for the team to help, lower at-risk kids? And
Well,
I wrote about this in 3 a lot, about people who have their own agendas, and when it comes to parents and PTO members and stuff like that, and people who are really, really involved in your school system, they're out for one thing. For the most part, they're out for the benefit of their one kid.
Yep.
And that kind of hurts that whole process.
we have 21 schools in our county, and two of the middle schools where I teach, and the other school, the demographics, I mean, we have 70% of free and reduced lunch. The other side of the county is a little more affluent. So how would you, so demographics play a big part in this, as far as this case is concerned. It would,
Huge.
yeah, huge. And we have a huge special ed population at our school. We have more special ed programs than the other schools combined. So I think we have like 28 or 29 special sessions for testing versus The other schools don't even have that combined, so it's
Right.
definitely an interesting problem.
Yeah, I don't know how that gets overcome.
What do you guys, what do you think, Jamal? We kind of interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're okay. You're okay. I was thinking more so about the goals of possibly the district and or the school, because it seems like I'm going back to this case study. It's was in like the second paragraph, I think, of the letter. What this means is that we are literally putting dollars behind our stated goals to empower school leaders. So are we moving away from directly impacting student achievement with instructional materials or instructional leaders, and more so of empowering the school leaders themselves? What are the school goals? What are the district goals?
Right. I think it goes back to like what Vernon and I were just talking about. I think it goes back to like, I think it causes the central office some issues, as far as like delegating who gets what, as far as money, and it puts a little bit of problems on them as well, making sure that all the schools and have enough financial, and then they can make decisions. And I mean, we've struggled this year with a little bit of leadership at our school, and so I worry a little bit about, if we went to something like this, about them making decisions for our school, and the teachers with
Right.
their agendas. So,
If you empower the principal also to do some financial things, like, if they're put in a position where they have access to the, I don't know, let's just say staff development, and now they're kind of pulling the purse strings on staff development. Let's say a principal is now in charge of that. There used to be somebody at the central office that was in charge of staff developing.
right.
So what happens to that person? Does that person now, is that position cut out? Or, I mean, I don't know how it works in every system, but it seems like in our system, we do not cut positions at the county office. We only add positions there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, we have a motto at our school: screw up, move up. If
That's what it is in Guilford County.
is that if the principal or assistant principal can't cut it, and so they can't go back to the laws that we talked about, and if they can't handle it, sometimes they get moved up. And I know that sounds crazy, but
It's the reality.
but it's reality, and we definitely have a motto that I can't say on this video. But
How many budgets do you have to go through? How many examples, rather, before you decide which one best suits the district or the school? Because I know this said it was they met with some pilot. It was a pilot program,
right.
and they met with some principals. Now, I'll be curious to know in this particular case study how many principals there were actually participants, and how many were not. Which schools or which programs were they targeted in those schools versus, some others? Going back to what you and Vernon were saying, like, how do you judge this? And how long was the pilot program? Because if it lasted 1 year.
Yeah. And can you go back? Can
Right.
you switch back to the other program if it doesn't work?
Right.
That was my question too, Jamal, is what principals did you talk to? Principals who generally have more lower income students and are maybe in more rural areas or inner city, or did you talk to principals who have affluent parents? Because I can tell you right now, we work with mostly affluent families, and in Guilford County, if people started taking money from their children, that's the way they would look at it. Taking money from my child and putting it over here in this school that's already failing. And that's just, unfortunately, that's just our reality. And I will have to say our school system is very much run by parents.
Yeah.
Very much run by parents. What all a parent has to do is get loud, and they get their way.
Yeah.
And I think the elephant in the room here, too, is what happens when you pull money away from one school via your whatever your formula is, and then that school doesn't make growth the following year.
Right.
Like, how are you going to, I mean, that's obviously going to be a major player in this in terms of, you know, how the Math 1 scores are, how the biology scores are. So the moment that you pull money away from one, and how do you justify that there was enough growth, or what if there wasn't any growth? What if you put money into an at-risk school and then there's not growth? So then what?
Exactly. I think that's huge, Vernon. I think that's huge. I mean, you know, do we succeed at this program, and if we don't, what happens? You know,
Right. And what are your measurements of success? Like, what is it? How do you proclaim success?
Right.
At what point is it?
Right.
Is it that an affluent school continues to make growth? Is it a school that has predominantly free and reduced lunch numbers? Now they meet growth but don't exceed growth. I mean, there's a ton of parameters that would have to be put in place to decide whether or not if it was if the expectations were met or not.
Right. And
then if you're affluent school, after you've taken some of that money away and given it to like more of a Title I school or whatever, then at what point does the affluent school start to perform lower than what they were? Do you give money back to them, or do you just say, oh, well, they'll come up with the money on their own? Or, like, where do you draw the line there? Because they shouldn't be left out just because like the families of that school have the means. So then where do you draw the line?
I guess then you might look at the subgroups.
Yeah.
And see, then another like just completely off base thing might be at my school, which I feel like we're pretty upper middle class school. So if we lose funding, but we do have at-risk kids, our school is not an at-risk school, but we have at-risk kids. So if our funding gets cut, what happens to the at-risk kids that go to an affluent school?
And how do you
are they going to get left
services that they need that are sometimes required by law? Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
how do you begin to compete with the public charter schools that are on the rise?
Right.
Oh,
they're also giving some of the same vouchers, some of the same funds as the regular public school systems would be.
Right, and that's going to be a competition that's going on within your school district with that charter school as well. Like, now that the affluent school has cut funding and maybe they've had to cut programs, now the charter school, it provides the programs that the public school cannot provide.
And does that then kind of lead to a reduction in your student enrollment in your public school system?
Which leads to a reduction in your budget for your school. Yep. I think it can very quickly become a domino effect, for sure.
The text was talking about Ohio has done this, and they went on a 5-year plan where they're going with this program. And then what do? Because they have to allocate funds for 5 years, let's say $150,000. And then let's say, like Vernon was saying, the testing doesn't go that way. I mean, so are they going to really suffer for 5 years because they've committed to this program? That's the scary part for me, is committing to something and say, we're going to do it, no matter what. I think, if we could do it on some trial basis, I still just don't think it works. I've seen our budgets in North Carolina. I've seen our county budgets, and our principal, I mean, we're struggling right now with money to have at the end of our year. So I'm really struggling with this.
We haven't discussed where we think the funds will go either. Like, it's obviously not going to be teacher pay.
No.
Is it going to be more teachers? Is it going to be, like, where is that money going to go? because it doesn't matter how much money you throw at a lower performing school with at-risk kids. If you don't put that money in the right place, it's still not going to work.
See, one thing we did this year, we started, we went from a B school to a C school. And so for the first 30 minutes of every day, one of the things that our PLC came up with was talking about having the kids read from 8 o'clock, 8:08 to 8:36 every day. So we were targeting, ones and twos on the test. And we were wondering what to do with 3s, 4s, and 5s. I mean, we wanted those 1s and 2s to move up, and we wanted 4s and 5s to grow some too. So our exploratory teachers took on a group of the higher level kids. Well, they had never taught the higher level kids, and they're talking about reading and trying to give them articles that would help their vocabulary. And our test scores went up just a little bit, but I still don't know if we did a good job with those higher level kids. And we have parents right now a little bit upset at us, like, well, my higher level kids didn't get the real teacher; they got another teacher. And so it's like, I don't know how much they grew this year. It's going to be interesting to see how much those kids grew and on their test scores and stuff. And going back to what we're saying about this, I think it has a correlation. Kids being left out. With some of these programs.
Right. Like we had a huge problem at our school this past year with originally we called it remediation, and then we changed that to enrichment, but it was basically the same thing, just under a different name. We had about 50 students in our school who needed concentrated enrichment / remediation. A lot of them were our EC kids that they needed to go back for math. And then what do you do with the 900 other kids for that time?
Yeah. And
we really struggled with this past year. And I think we're going to go to a smart lunch next year to try to accommodate, kind of everybody.
Yeah.
But we really struggled with that.
Our high school did a similar program, and everybody, they would send everybody would go from a certain time. They could go get their homework done. They could go meet with teachers who they needed to meet with. And they pretty much, you had to go somewhere. You could not, you had to go to the library. You had to go to a teacher's class. You could not be wandering the halls. So I know our high school was on board because my wife works at the high school. And I think that program worked. So it was a good deal for her too.
We're going to give it a try next year. So we're under a similar program where kids they have to be somewhere, and teachers 2 times a week have 30-minute tutorials that they offer where kids can come back and get missed work or make up work, or it doesn't have to be that, but it seems like that's part of what it is.
Well, we stopped giving kids zeros. We said if they don't, they don't have a choice about doing homework. We had a program at our school where they had to do their homework. They could not. Teachers weren't giving zeros for homework. They were come during lunch, after school, before school, and I think that helped out a lot this year as well.
Were funds, did teachers, I guess, receive compensation for that if they stayed after school or provided other extra resources?
They did, and that goes right along with, would there be money for tutoring and things like that, All right, guys, we're down to about 8 minutes. The first question said, what are the problems? I think we've talked about the problems. What is the central problem? Would there be secondary problems? I think we answered that. Number 3 says, once you've identified the problem, what are some common practices to overcome it? Analyze them. Will it work? What do you think so? Why not? And then the last question says, what must be done immediately and long-term to avoid this problem from recurring? Anybody got a solution to number 4? What must be done immediately and long-term to avoid this problem from reoccurring?
Well, I think immediately one of the first things there needs to be a sense of transparency on the current the current budget. I mean, that's something that a lot of us have never seen. We had to ask for it to see it this time. That's probably something that should be out there to begin with.
Right.
I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like you, Whitney. When I asked to see the budget, my principal kind of hem-hawed around a little bit. I finally got it. And then when I saw it, I mean, and it broke down everything. And I actually posted it in 4A to talk a little bit about, you know, who decides who spends what. But it was just kind of interesting to see, like, what kind of money we start off with, because I know sometimes our principal, when we order PE equipment and we order, he's saying, like, he can only spend a certain amount of money through certain funds that are given to him by the state. And he would, sometimes we would order athletic equipment needed for our teams through our PE budget. So that was a little bit separate. So I know they can maneuver a little bit and move money and kind of, you know, get equipment. It's like, I really feel like that budget should be out there so that all the teachers and all the parents and everybody can see it. You know, we know what's going on. There's no transparency. We really know what's going on up front, and you know, what programs can really benefit from this.
Mm. I think it also helps to almost is like an accountability between all your stakeholders, kind of like with the branches of government. You know, it's a checks and balances system to make sure that your principal is not allocating funds to one particular group of people or one particular, you know, athletic program or arts program or whatever. And I don't know, I think that's important, so that you don't have somebody who's just throwing your budget away for.
Vernon, do y'all have your own, do your sports teams have their own separate accounts at the high school?
They do, but we also have a booster club that serves all our athletics. So there's a situation at our school now where the rule is that you're limited to one fundraiser for one athletic sport. Mm-hmm. And coaches are trying to get around that a little bit by doing a fundraiser, but also do things like the banners where people will, you post banners. I'm sure you guys know about the banners. So we've got some sports who are using a fundraiser. Maybe they're selling coupon books or whatever it is that they're selling. But then they'll also try to do a camp, a little kids camp, or they'll do a banner or something like that. So, we're in a situation where we're like, okay, what constitutes as a fundraiser? Mm-hmm. And when one, as well as I do, when one team does it and the other coaches and other teams see, other parents really even see that, money was made in that, maybe they were able to buy new uniforms, or maybe they were able to buy new equipment, it puts the pressure on the coaches of other programs to try to raise that same similar type of way.
We have to rent our facilities in the summertime. Coaches have to rent the facilities. If I wanted to run a basketball camp, I have to pay $3 per day per kid to run a camp.
Why?
Gosh.
Is it because school is not in session then, or?
And basically what it does is a lot of coaches are like, well, we're not paying to rent a facility where I clean it every day, so that's one way that our county gets revenue that they say kind of takes care of other issues for athletics, which a lot of coaches in our county are really upset about. But, it's the funding. It's a hard deal. I didn't realize there was so much fundraising. It's just unbelievable. And high school's 10 times worse than the middle school. And middle school needs the money the most. As far as where we are. It's crazy.
Brandon, I know you.
And it also seems. Go ahead.
I know you said one. You said one fundraiser a year per sport.
Yep.
Right.
So is that if you do it through the school, or is that per booster group?
Each team is able to run one fundraiser, and then they'll get additional funding from our booster club that is over all of athletics. So,
The state
but
of
you know that's subject to the booster club.
Right.
State of North Carolina
So
said,
if you got a lot of baseball parents on the booster club, and you're a basketball coach, you may not get
Right.
what you're asking for.
The reason I was asking is at our school, we don't have athletics at all because we're an art school. So if the kid wants to play athletics, they play at whatever their districted school is. They could still participate in athletics, but they
Right.
just have to go to their home school. But each art area, there are 8 art areas. And if, like, for example, the dance department decides to do a fundraiser, we can do one fundraiser that's sponsored by the Weaver Dance Department. But the Weaver Dance Boosters can do as many fundraisers as they want to because that stays in the booster account. And then we can buy from wherever we want to. It doesn't have to be those approved vendors through the school system, which are about 2.
Right.
Very few.
What you're saying makes so much sense because our band, for example, we have a really, really good band, and we have a lot of people that's involved in our band, and it's kind of a decorated type band,
Right.
and they do tons of fundraising,
Okay. Yeah.
and so a lot of our coaches, I think, feel like that's not quite fair if the band's doing 12 fundraisers and the football team can only do one.
Right. I was just curious.
all right, guys, we're down to a minute. I think we've answered a lot of questions. I think we have a lot of questions about school-based budgeting. There's pros and cons to everything. I think the cons probably outweigh the pros a little bit on this one. I think we have, and it depends on where you are and what kind of school district you're in and how many schools are in your district. A lot of that, So hopefully we've answered all the questions, and hopefully Dr. Ellis will feel like we've done that. Everybody, I think we got about 20 seconds. Everybody good? We'll do a peer review. I guess we're peer reviewing 4A and 4B next week, okay?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Thank y'all.
All right.
Good.
Go Warriors.
Thanks, guys.
Go Warriors.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye, y'all.